This meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public notification of this meeting was posted, and distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, correct, Ms. Brock? Okay, need a motion to approve the agenda for this workshop.
So moved.
Second. By Councilman Glover, second. We have 15 minutes total for citizen comment period. Do we have anyone signed up? No public comment, okay. All right, we'll start off with discussion. Affordable and workforce housing, where are we? Where do we want to go, and how do we get there?
All good questions.
Right.
Thanks so much for agreeing to have a workshop today. Staff really wanted an opportunity for council to have a real exchange with staff and with our presenters today to talk about some of those issues you addressed. Hopefully in the coming weeks, when we begin to talk about our strategic planning, workforce housing will be one of those major topics that we can work on to find a sustainable solution that carries workforce housing in Beaufort County well into the future. This morning, we've invited the chairman of our Regional Housing Trust Fund, Wendy Zara, here to speak. She is going to talk, and her executive director are going to talk this morning about the trust fund, what the trust fund does for Beaufort County, some of the projects that they're working on now, and what the future of the trust fund looks like for Beaufort and Jasper County, because this is a regional trust fund, as well as we've invited Jeremy Cook, who's an attorney with Hainsworth Sinkler Boyd. He works in their public finance practice. He is our bond attorney. He has worked with not only Beaufort County, but many other counties and municipalities on workforce housing funding strategies. So he's going to talk for a few minutes and help us understand the things we can and can't do when it comes to funding affordable workforce housing, as well as if there's some time left, staff has prepared a few slides and maybe can answer some questions about ongoing projects, things that we're doing right now. With that, Wendy, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having this workshop. I really appreciate it. I will start with the absolute basics of the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust in case there's any of you here who aren't that familiar with it. It was created by 8 different jurisdictions, which is basically Beaufort and Jasper counties and all of the municipalities except for Ridgeland. And also through an intergovernmental agreement that each jurisdiction signed, money was pledged for 10 years. One of the recommendation, this IGA came from a recommendation of a consultant that the county hired to study and recommend how to develop creative workforce housing. And there was her recommendation that we consider, when we were created, to also join with a entity that could administer us and who was a lender. And that was Community Works. Community Works has signed a contract with Beaufort County, and up until now, they have been our administrator. One of the things we're doing now is a pretty big change. We on our own incorporated as a 501c3, and we have federal tax exemption, even though we could use Community Works, because we need that ability to be able to stand on our own, and our intent, of course, was to become our own entity. So they have done a great job. I have to say, they really have done a great job helping us with all the back office stuff, helping us with their loan programs, their underwriting. Our budget was their budget, that type of thing. We have, as I said, incorporated, and we also have just hired an interim executive director, which is Dana Totman, and you'll hear him speak in a minute. but he's got a whole career of experience in affordable housing. I'll let you talk about that. I'll let him tell you more about it. We have actually approved one loan, and that loan is to a developer called Commonwealth, which is actually up here on Boundary Street. In that situation, we committed to lend $500,000, and Community Works is going to lend $1,000. So we got good leverage on that money. The loan has not closed yet. We have many other opportunities in the pipeline, most of them multifamily so far. And of course, we want to work with everybody in the region and essentially be the convener and the place to go, as well as being able to finance projects and make this a reality, which we will succeed. But I'm going to introduce you now to Dana, because he knows way more about affordable housing than I do.
Hey, Wendy, can I ask you a quick question before you do that? Wendy, I may have misheard you, but you, with regard to the loan that you made, you gave them a $500,000, and you said Community Work gave them $1,000?
$1 million.
100. Sorry?
$1 million. Is that Larry?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
uh-huh.
Hi, Larry, wherever you are.
Hi.
Yeah, so we got 2-to-1 leverage on our money.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard you. I didn't realize they gave them $1 million.
Yeah.
When you make that loan, what kind of a rate do you give the people?
In this case, it's going to really depend on the terms of the loan, but in this case, 3%, and it's actually for 15 years, which is longer than we would usually lend, but this is a LIHTC, a tax credit deal, and so they absolutely have to have some long-term money. They are paying us back through cash flow every year, and then at the end of 15 years, anything that they owe, whether it's the principal or any interest that they have not yet paid, they'll pay us.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay. And could you say your name for the record too, when you come up? Okay, thank you.
Thanks for having me. My name is Dana Totman. It's Dana Totman. And this is the beginning of my second week as the interim executive director of the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust. I am working part-time in this role. So what you're going to hear here is about half a week's worth of accomplishments and observations. But let me explain a little bit about how I got here and how I think I might be able to help out. I retired a little over a year ago as the president and CEO of a nonprofit organization in Portland, Maine, called Avesta Housing. And we had, by the time I left, about 3,200 affordable homes. We had a home ownership center where we helped prepare people to buy their own homes. We created an advocacy coalition to make sure our state was getting its share of resources. And we had a couple of assisted living facilities, affordable assisted living facilities. So that was the types of things that I was involved in there. Clearly, it was a fairly large organization. And after 22 years there and reaching a certain age, it felt time to move on. My wife and I were searching the country to find a place to come live, and had really could go anywhere, and we came here and fell in love and are now living in Beaufort. So I come here liking the area. I still love Maine. We still have a summer residence there, but I also have a passion for affordable housing. So early on, earlier this year, I was reading the local newspapers and finding out, I wonder what's going on with affordable housing here, and was hoping that maybe there was a way that I could plug in. And so I found a couple of names of people that had been appointed to this new group, board members, and I called them up to introduce myself and to learn more. I learned that Community Works had a role, and I called them up and to find out more about what was going on. And so I learned that it's a very new organization, that it's a response to the affordable housing crisis that's not just in this area of the state or this area of the country. So have sort of reached out, and I think the combination of the people at Community Works who wanted to move away from their contractual relationship, and the board who had, as Wendy indicated, incorporated, wanted to start their own staff, and so they asked if I would do this. And I said yes, on an interim basis. I am retired, but nevertheless, I love this, and I want to stay involved, and I hope I can help out. So that's a little bit about how I got here. In addition to the 22 years at Avesta Housing, I was the deputy director and the acting director of our state's housing finance agency, the equivalent of South Carolina Housing. And the other chapter of my working career, I was the executive director of a community action agency. So have worked in this nonprofit or government field. Also have served on a number of boards, from hospital boards to planning boards to United Way boards. And so ultimately, I've sort of spent my life trying to make our community better places, either as a volunteer or as a professional career. So I'm now here, and I'm thrilled to be able to deploy some of those skills and experiences. So in the week that I've been here, I've looked at the numbers and looked at what I think are the housing problems in this area, and they vary. I think we all know that we need more workforce housing. We need some areas need more senior housing. Some areas need homes repaired. The needs in rural areas are a little bit different than the needs of our more populated areas. Then the needs of an 80-year-old widow is very different than a 35-year-old single mother, or a young couple that are just starting out hoping to buy their home, or somebody that's moving here and wants to work at the hospital but can't get close enough. So
Terry, I'm sorry, but your voice keeps dropping.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And we'll mix in a little bit of an accent here that will make it even harder, so I apologize. Needless to say, the needs are tremendously different throughout Beaufort County, and of course it's Beaufort and Jasper County. So the rural areas in particular are different than the urban, more built-up areas, and the populations have different needs. So we have a tall order at Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust to respond to all of that. And so I looked first at these applications that Community Works had, the request for proposals that were done last May, and they were done in concert with Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust. And so there were 5 or 6 entities that responded. It was generally presented that Beaufort Jasper would provide loans of $500,000, and that in most cases, Community Works would provide loans of $1 million to $1.5 million. So ultimately, a couple dropped out. The Carrington, I think it's Carrington Manor one, is proceeding, and that's the 62 senior units that are just down the street here. And then there are a couple others that are still in the works. The others that are still in works are a home ownership project in Hilton Head, and a rental workforce development. I believe it's in Okatee. That's a partnership with the hospital and a private developer. So, you know, in looking at that, that would be around 200 affordable homes or 180 affordable homes, those 3 combined. So that would be a nice achievement if we get there. It also has some geographic diversity, has seniors and younger people. So it's a nice mix. But as I'm also looking at this, I'm starting to realize that this relationship with Community Works, they obviously are underwriting these very responsibly to provide their loans. And should they make a decision to not fund one or to create different parameters, that affects our $500,000. So my takeaway is I need to spend some time with Community Works to examine these applications very closely, as well as to work with the board to make these incredibly important financial decisions. So that's one observation I have. I step back from that and look at that RFP, and in hindsight, kind of say, well, maybe we weren't, how is this really going to serve the rural areas? And how important is it to leverage money? And how do we compare a loan versus a grant? And this business is very complicated. And since doing that RFP, the Community Works staff and others have been approached by a number of groups. Could we have X number of dollars to do this? Could we have Y to do that? All sound good. But it's our job to try to figure out how do we develop the appropriate criteria and some uniformity to the applications is what's important. How low income the people are that are being served is what's important. The length of affordability is what's important. The number of people, a lot of different criteria that we can apply. So our job, as I see it very quickly, is to provide, informed guidance on how we best spend and make our investments going forward. So that's one of my key takeaways. The other thing that I want to share is that this morning was a symposium that about 100 people attended, and they were from throughout the two counties, and there's a lot of groups doing a lot of things. But what was particularly noteworthy, in my opinion, beyond all the energy and interest that were there, is that Senator Davis and a representative from South Carolina Housing were there listening to the group, and I think paying attention. And because in this affordable housing world, much of the money and the resources ultimately do come from the federal government or the state government or a combination of both. And so it's important that the working relationships with those layers of government and our organization be enhanced. And so that was another takeaway. The last thing I want to sort of mention with you, again, I've only got a few days into this, but my experience is such that I've observed there are 8 board members. There's 9 seats, one is vacant, so there's 8, could be 9, as originally conceived in the intergovernmental agreement that all the parties signed. There were 9 members, there's 8 members, and now I'm a part-time interim staff. So my takeaway is that's not enough. We need more capacity, whether it's more board members, more staff. We need to really up the health of our organization to really fulfill, I think, the demands and the requirements that were in mind back when we were created. So my experience is such that a healthy nonprofit, fully functioning healthy nonprofit, with adequate board members, with adequate variety of skills, be it law or banking or commercial real estate, or residents themselves, as well as adequate staff, you need that to be really impactful. And so that's a note that I have made here in the first week, that I think we want to be far more impactful. So that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about where I see this organization. I look forward to certainly getting to know just the board and everybody else as I settle in here. But most importantly, I know we are a creation of all of the counties and towns and cities, and it's important that we satisfy you as well. And so that was probably my first note of make sure we do a good job. So happy to answer questions from there.
thank you for taking this on as an interim part-time position. It's quite a challenge, I'm sure.
Yes.
We'll open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
Okay, Community Works wants to end their relationship with the Housing Trust. And the way you are conceiving of that by expanding the membership and staff to replace what Community Works is currently doing? Is that my understanding?
That's generally accurate. They want to, my understanding, and I don't want to speak for them, but certainly what they told me was they're in Greenville providing adequate support to the board, to provide adequate support to the various groups that have an interest in affordable housing was just hard, and that they wanted to end the relationship. Meanwhile, back in that original bylaws and the intergovernmental agreement was the idea that Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust might incorporate and become a 501c3 nonprofit, might hire its own staff, and might have different approaches to how they are administered. So the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust Board has made that decision.
I think Miss Sarah, Wendy,
If I
what?
could just add, it was a mutual decision on the part of the Housing Trust and Community Works. We both realized that we actually, the Housing Trust, in order to be able to actually move forward and get stuff done faster, we really needed to have our own staff. The amount of money that Community Works was working for, which was 10% of their first year, which was $203,000, if you can believe it, they were spending so much time that their costs had exceeded that. Meanwhile, we did not have a person on the ground locally who could be responsive quickly to whether it's just random questions or builders or developers, or even going around and making sure that we knew personally the different jurisdictions that are participating. So it is a mutual decision for both. I just want to make that clear because they really have done a great job for us.
Right.
So I just want to make that,
So going forward, the monies that have already been expended for the first project, the $1 million that came from Community Works, how will that money be handled?
well, they will still, the loan hasn't closed, so nobody's actually spent the money yet. They will continue to close the loan just as they would, as if 100% of it was their money.
Okay,
And going forward, what we are thinking of doing when Community Works and the county no longer have a contract, we will probably have our own contract with Community Works to do underwriting because we don't have that capacity.
right.
And to service the loan, we're not in the business of collecting payments and
Gotcha.
that type of thing. So I think the relationship will continue, it just will be different.
Different, really. Okay,
Okay.
very good.
Other questions? Councilman Glover, I'm surprised you haven't asked about how to handle the rural areas.
Well, you took the
reading your
question out of my mind, out of my mouth and stuff. Yeah. I'm very much interested in developing affordable housing, workforce housing for the rural community, particularly that on St. Helens. So you talk about different categories and the areas being sort of vast. There's no one plan for one particular, for the entire county. So what's your approach? What would be the approach for you or for the agency in addressing those kind of needs? Even with the land that's available for some people, but can't afford a house.
Sure.
Or you talk about rental unit and how can in a rural area
Yeah, yeah.
that could benefit both the landlord as well as the tenants.
Much of the funds that come from the federal government or the state government, in my opinion, are skewed toward non-rural areas. They are for projects of a certain scale, They might require water and sewer. HUD is Housing and Urban Development by its name. So the strategies for rural areas, and trust me, living in Maine, it was pretty rural. You really need to work with those local officials, and in many cases, it's home repairs that they might say, that's what's important to us. Or, yes, we need new developments, but we want them to be 6 units or 8 units rather than 50 units. Or they might be more for seniors. And so it's really getting to know the folks in that community and helping to understand and have them articulate some of the ideas that I just mentioned, and then come up with the programs and the resources to address that. It's harder. It's a different set of resources. It doesn't have that scale. It doesn't attract the interest of the larger developers. But we all know that there are people that have needs in those rural areas just as much as the non-rural areas. And so it really is working with the local officials and then trying to develop the appropriate response and then seeking the money that will work. And it's different money that would probably work in a rural area versus a Hilton Head or a Beaufort or a.
I'm just going to throw up a hypothetical, not a hypothetical, but a real issue for a lot of homeowners. And when I use the word homeowners, I'm talking about modular homes, mobile homes, et cetera, sitting on the heirs property, but the home actually need maybe some renovation. Very little assistance in that area. Is that something that could be addressed, through you, through the agency?
Yeah.
Directly or indirectly?
Yes, to answer your.
Then answer. You can stop right there.
Okay.
Yes, that need is real. And it may take a little bit of lobbying. The State Housing Finance Agency, South Carolina Housing. Rural Development has long had a program called the Housing Preservation Grant Program that may or may not have had funds that found their way to these rural areas. So again, it's largely an it's a combination of advocacy, in my opinion, and understanding what resources do exist and doing our very best to get them to the area.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, we've got to hear from someone else too. We're really glad you're on board, but we'd like to keep getting updates at this committee meeting as we go forward too. And so we'll go.
Be my pleasure.
Thank you very much, yes. And who's going to introduce our next person? Mr. Robinson, or?
So this is Jeremy Cook. Jeremy Cook is, as I said, our attorney with Hainsworth Sinkler Boyd, and he's going to talk with you about some funding options.
Good to be with you all today. I was before you all a few months ago, you may remember when we talked about the optional redemption of the county's general obligation bonds to use some of your cash built up to pay off that debt. So it's good to be back with you all again today. This is a growing area of need across the state. Y'all are certainly in one of the epicenters, but not the only epicenter of the need for attainable housing. So, we are a statewide law firm. I've been doing this 25 years with my firm, and we're privileged to represent a lot of those growth areas. So we represent, the areas around city and county of Greenville and the areas around city and county of Charleston. So areas where these discussions are happening a lot, and obviously y'all are right there too. I do think it's really important. There was a reference to it earlier that this is part of a longer-term strategic plan. This isn't something that's going to get fixed in a month or two or even a year or two, if we're really being honest about it, right? This takes money over a concerted period of time and lots of different programs, because there are different needs. As Councilman Glover pointed out, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. So I view it very much as a buffet that's going to be really important to have a lot of different things to choose from on that buffet to meet all these needs. So just from a high level, that's my perspective. As you as a public body are looking at how do we start to make a dent in these incredible needs, and there's not much that's a greater need than affordable, attainable, safe housing, right? I mean, as needs go, that's as big as it comes as far as I'm concerned. So there are a lot of threshold questions that obviously aren't going to be answered today, but as a council, whether it's a city council or a county council is looking at this, in terms of what approaches are you willing to support and consider as part of this. So, on the most direct line is the county willing to incur debt to provide these kinds of services? So, for example, the city of Charleston has done 2 different referenda where the voters approved the issuance of general obligation bonds for the sole purpose of providing attainable, affordable housing. So that's the only purpose the bonds could be used for. So as a threshold issue, that is something that I would always suggest that a council consider, and that's how does that fit into your overall financial plan? Typically, additional mills would be needed to pay that debt. So is there the support by the people of Beaufort County to pay more taxes to have general obligation bonds specifically for this purpose? And you could do a lot of good things without doing that, but I think that is an important consideration. So in the city of Charleston's example, the voters have twice approved the issuance of general obligation bonds, the first time for $10 million and the second time for $20 million by overwhelming margins. And this was several years ago where I would say the need was less great than it is today. Always been a need, but I would say it's a bigger need. So things to think about, is the county willing to issue general obligation bonds to provide attainable housing? That would be a step. Sometimes I think it's helpful to talk specifically about what other areas have done, not that you are limited to what they've done, but if something has worked someplace else, we're a small state, it's worth knowing what's worked in other places, I think. So City of Greenville recently closed a financing it was actually financing by the Greenville Housing Fund, which is a 501c3. So the financing was done by the 501c3. It was not a City of Greenville borrowing. However, the City of Greenville had an expectation that they were going to build into their budget $2.5 million a year to support this initiative to this housing fund. And the housing fund was able to do a 10-year borrowing, and as opposed to getting money over time, got $14 million on the day of closing, where obviously you can be much more impactful. From the City of Greenville's perspective, this has been a long held important aspect of governments by the City Council and by Mayor Knox White, who's just reelected for an 8th term this week. So, but what the City Council agreed was in this year's budget there was $2.5 million, and then in every year as budget comes around, they would consider appropriating another $2.5 million. But the city did not commit to $2.5 million over a period of time, because then you would have been in a position of pledging either full faith and credit, or this all of a sudden seems like city debt, right? So what City Council said is every year for the next, I believe, 8 years, they would consider and have a present day expectation to appropriate $2.5 million. But at the end of the day,
Jeremy, I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask a quick question about the source of funding for the $2.5 million.
sure, it's just general dollar funds for the
Ad
city.
valorem taxes?
Yes. I mean, including
thank-
that, it wouldn't have to be limited to that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So again, this was just done, I mean, Tom, you pulled it up too. I think what did we decide, 6 weeks ago? So it's a pretty cutting edge. But this is debt, again, of the nonprofit, not debt of the city. So, a reasonable council could decide, yeah, we could help support debt, but maybe we're not willing to incur debt. Like those are decisions that, y'all have to make,
And they do it year by year.
That's right. It's subject to appropriation. So it's similar to what you've done over the in the past with like lease purchase obligations or different obligations where it's subject to appropriation. Now, that's not the most effective way in terms of a cost to borrow money because it's not as strong of a security. So there is a flip side, right? A general obligation bond, you'd be able to get a much better interest rate on than an appropriation backed, but that's just the nature. But City of Greenville did that, and I quite honestly, I think we'll see more of that done. That bond was bought by Truist Bank, and I'm sure other banks would be too. That's the one that happened to buy that one, so I'm not giving them an advertisement here. But so that's what City of Greenville has done. We talked about general obligation bonds. Obviously, you have the ability to issue general obligation bonds without a referendum, up to 8% of your assessed value. In a growing area, you have available assessed value, but you can also do it with a referendum. So the only difference with a referendum, it's still a general obligation bond. It's a pledge of the full faith and credit. So you'll raise whatever taxes are needed to pay it back. That's what a pledge of full faith and credit means. But if it's referendum approved, it doesn't count against your 8%. It's outside that 8% bucket. We've also seen a couple of our counties are looking to see how multi-county parks could be used as a revenue source. Y'all have done a little bit of revenue multi-county parks. You tend to see it more with industrial projects. So y'all haven't done as much as some counties, but you certainly have done some. With a multi-county park, 2 counties agree to work together and they designate certain properties within those parks. It's just a designation. It doesn't have to be a park like a brick wall around a industrial park for commercial properties. Once property is in a multi-county park under the South Carolina Constitution, the county controls how the millage is distributed. So if you think of a normal project, school district gets X amount based on millage, city gets X amount, county gets X amount. In a multi-county park with limited exceptions, the county decides how that money is distributed. Cities do have to consent when their property is placed on multi-county park. Other political entities don't have a consent right for multi-county parks. And what multi-county park would allow to do, and what we're seeing some counties look at, is you're allowed to give credits off that for specific projects. So for example, if a project were coming in and the county wanted to offset some of their operating costs, the county could agree, say for the first 10 years, to give them a 20% credit on their annual fee in lieu bill. So it comes like a tax bill, but it's a fee in lieu bill. County doesn't have that ability to do that against tax bills. But this has been a tool that's been used by businesses for many, many years in South Carolina. But now some of our more urban counties are re-examining how could we use this for affordable housing, not just to attract new jobs to an area. So that'd be a multi-county park. It's a county-controlled process, but the city would also play a role. And I know we're throwing a lot out, so please ask questions. I'm just trying to give you some ideas. The tax increment fitting.
Larry has a question.
Okay, Larry?
Sorry.
Barry, I just want to circle back to your $2.5 million. That was obligated by the council, and was it given to the 501c3 for their use without supervision? Was it a grant to them of the cash?
Right. So as protection for the bank, what it was set up was there was an escrow agreement that the bank holds. So that money goes straight to the escrow holder, which is the bank that did the lending, so Truist Bank in this sense, to be used for debt service on that bond.
Wait a minute. I see. Okay, got it now. The connection of the $2.5 million is to the debt service of the bond. I have it now. Thank you. Okay.
And so, that's right. So that's going back to the $2.5 million allows them to borrow the $14 million, and the $14 million is what's being used for the projects. And then as the city makes appropriations, it goes to the escrow account so that it's there for debt service.
Right. And will that eventually retire the bond?
Yeah, so it actually, it's not going to be enough in and of itself, but the Housing Authority has other dollars, but it would be,
Okay.
We'll go a long ways, but it won't be enough to do all of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So where were we? Tax increment financing. So y'all have seen some of this. There've been various TIFs, that's what we call them, right? So TIFs are used in an area most successfully where there's not yet development or there's underdevelopment, and it's going to be either redeveloped or developed, right? So that it's not already at its top dollar value, right? Because if it's already fully developed, there may be incremental increase, but there's not a lot of increase left to come. So ideally, you're looking for an area that is, there's nothing there now, or what's there is going to be torn down and rebuilt or substantially improved. So TIF is a tool the county's used before, City of Beaufort has used before. It does take the consent of the overlapping taxing districts if their millage is going to be part of the increment. Again, it can be a really successful tool, particularly if you're looking at an area that we believe is undervalued today. Either it's undervalued because there's not the infrastructure that it needs, it's undervalued for some other reason, and you could use TIF dollars to do that. So you capture the increment from what the value is today to what the value is after some project happens, and the tax is the result from that higher value is what you capture for purposes of paying for the infrastructure. Have you all seen the TIFs? Is that?
Could you explain how the City of Beaufort did it? Maybe that'd help.
Yeah, so and we worked on some of these, this was a long time ago, but so I think we had a Boundary Street TIF was one of the TIFs that we had. So you designate certain areas under the statute that create blight. So sometimes blight is underdeveloped, sometimes it's abandoned housing, sometimes it's inadequate infrastructure, water and sewer, roads. So the statute lays forth the considerations you're looking at to say this area isn't what it could be, basically, okay? So then you take a snapshot, city approved it in this case, overlapping taxing entities participated, and you take a snapshot of what the value is today.
Point in time.
In a point in time.
Okay.
So today's value for all this property that we've identified, and you do a redevelopment plan, is $1 million, is today's value. And then you, years forward, when you're ready to do a borrowing from it, which what triggers this, you get ready to do a borrowing, and the value now is, because the city started putting money in, the value is $5 million. So initially it was $1 million, now it's 5. So the tax is the result from that $4 million differential. So you take your taxes applied by the millages, right? So the taxing entities are still getting what they used to get. Like you're not taking anything from their base. You're just taking from the increment. It can then be used for infrastructure. So city issues that, and you use that for water and sewer line extensions. You use that for roads. You use that for a park that makes people want to put housing around it because now there's a recreational amenity. So as a general rule, improvements by a TIF have to be publicly owned. So that's limited its application. That's different in different states. So occasionally you'll see, a developer come from, say, hey, I'm in Florida and we use TIF and I'm going to pitch this to Beaufort County, but their TIF doesn't have that restriction of public ownership. So in the affordable housing arena, where you'd be looking at is using the TIF dollars for a county TIF on infrastructure serving. So it could be infrastructure serving a private affordable housing, attainable housing project, or if you partnered with a city under the city statute, you actually have the ability to do privately owned attainable housing can be financed with TIF dollars. And as we're looking at different things, over time, the statutes have been amended, and y'all obviously have a very active local legislative delegation, including the accommodation fees that we're going to talk about in a minute as well with Senator Davis. Right now, the municipal TIF statute is broader in its application than the county. So the county, you can still do it, but you're looking at infrastructure for a private development. For the county one, you can't finance the actual building itself. But I would suggest this may be a time that there could be support for making those statutes similar. And then I think the last place on my list I wanted to go to was the recent changes to the accommodation taxes. It's gotten a lot of attention from the City and County Managers Association and the county and city associations themselves. So I think folks are pretty aware of this. It's a really, really powerful step to be able to use accommodation fees for workforce housing. I would urge y'all to consider, and I'm hoping this is just the first step, that it's only 15% and it's only until 2030. So it's a step though, and it's a really important step, and I'm very supportive of that. I'm hoping that the legislature will broaden it and lengthen it, and also look at the hospitality tax dollars, because a lot of areas collect more hospitality tax dollars than they do accommodation tax dollars. But again, super, super powerful, and I take that as a sign that on the state level, there's growing support for giving local governments more tools, and I hope we continue to see that on the attainable housing front. So let me just look over here. We had a pre-meeting and I kind of talked about, did we leave anything out, John? Anyways, that was a lot to throw out, and no one expects y'all to absorb all that in one meeting, but I'm happy to have some back and forth or ask questions about any of those.
This morning, I had one, before I forget, and then
Sure.
I'll open it. This morning, I listened to a South Carolina Association of Counties seminar.
Yeah.
And they talked about the accommodation tax. They mentioned that you could even go and use previous year funds, but I don't think that's possible for us, but which surprised me. I was surprised.
Yeah, so I won't say that you couldn't do, I would have to see how you would show that you're satisfying that 15% test. Because I don't think it's 15% of what you collected in the aggregate ever, right? But maybe there's specific language and I'm not thinking of at the moment that says it's 15% of kind of what you have going forward or what you currently have sitting there. So that wouldn't, I don't know that to be the case, but I could see that.
It's Mr.
But-
Deloach was.
Yeah, and they were a major force behind helping that. So I believe them. I haven't seen that.
I'll open it up.
So when we discussed the 15% of using A-tax, Mr. Kevin explained to us all that. There were a lot of hoops to jump through. I wrote to Senator Davis asking what's up with that. I mean, there are a lot of hoops to jump through. Any way that's going to be relaxed a little bit?
Well, I mean, this is brand new, right? So I think it's certainly reasonable to think, at the same time that I hope that if we get broader and deeper in the use of that we can see how it's working and perhaps some of those things won't be needed. So I think when new tools are opened up to local governments, sometimes there's a natural reticence to set a lot of parameters and a lot of restrictions. But if we can, I think, have some positive momentum of how this is being used, but it would be even better if it was bigger, longer, and less restrictive, then I would be hopeful for that.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
The thing that you talked about in Greenville County where they put up money that was then used to get a larger loan.
The city of Greenville, yes, sir.
When we established the housing trust, each of the entities put up a sum of money and pledged a sum of money over a 10-year period of time. Could we leverage that to borrow money? Our portion, because other entities are the municipalities and I can't use their money, but is it possible that what we pledged could be used in the manner that Greenville did?
So who, just so I want to make sure I'm understanding your question, Councilman, so who is that money going to today?
Right now, it sits with the housing trust. Each of the entities using ARPA funds
Yeah.
created the housing trust.
Right.
We, the county, put in the most money, obviously, because we're the biggest entity.
Sure.
And we're pledging a specific amount of money over a 10-year period of
Right.
time.
Subject to appropriation in each
Yeah.
year's budget. Right.
So what I'm asking is, the money that's there, could our portion be used like Greenville did to take that to leverage to get a much larger loan to conduct a project.
Right, so, I mean, it does sound very similar to what Greenville did. I guess the part that I would need to see is, when we're talking about the money that's already there as opposed to money coming in,
Right.
I would need to think about that, I think, to what that would look like. But certainly going forward, it sounds like it would be the same model as what City of Greenville just did. But if you're also looking to leverage dollars that are already there, I'd need to think about that. But,
Okay,
but,
just a question.
you know, absolutely. But otherwise, its structure sounds very, very similar to what we saw in Greenville.
Anyone else have some questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I might, and I apologize for coming in late, but
No worries.
if I might ask, when we look at the consideration of the applicants applying for these affordable homes, and we use the median average income of 40%, 60%, and 80%, and then we consider the percentage that the applicant would be required, and for the 40%, the applicant would be required to match 20%. And I'm on page 75, item number 6, just for your information. And what I'm questioning is, at 60% median income, there's a 60% required match from the applicant, if I'm not mistaken. And what puzzles me is at 80%, there's only a 20% required. So the median income at 40% and the median income at 80%, they both require the same 20% match, and that doesn't seem fair to me.
Are you looking at the main package for tonight's meeting? Oh, okay. He's not gonna be able to.
It says, yeah,
That's-
I don't-
that-
is this a
ask
specific
staff.
program the county already has? I'm not sure what the specifics of what
Yeah,
we're,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's
in our backup material. I don't think that is for, these are referring to, Gerald, so the material in the backup is a compilation of statutes and of various programs from, particularly the county of Greenville and the city of Greenville. And what you're referring to is, he's referring to the county.
This
of
Greenville County is, yeah.
Yeah, their multi-county part.
Yeah.
But
So, I'm sorry that I wasn't immediately following with where you're going, Councilman, but yeah, so that's part of Greenville County's, they did an initiative where they wanted kind of some parameters for workforce attainable housing, including through their multi-county park project, which is a new project. So those were decisions, I believe, made by Greenville County. I just would have to look at them, but I don't think there's anything in that that would limit how it was applied in Beaufort County.
Yeah, ours could be, that's
Yeah.
just an example, right? That's just an example, Mr. Kevin, yeah. We could change.
That multi-county park policy that the county of Greenville established, they could set their parameters any way they wanted to, right? So if Beaufort County wanted to do the same model, they could set their parameters and put every.
Right. That's right, and I do a lot of work with Greenville County. I didn't work on that specific project, but I'm guessing the thought was in terms of affordability, in terms of going forward, that 20%, which is the same as what, for example, private homeowners need, not to have mortgage insurance, is, also 20%. That's why it was that same 20%. I'm assuming, just in terms of ability to make future payments, but I don't know that to be the case, but I'm guessing that's why it was the same for both.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Cook.
Yeah.
For me, particularly, want to do something with affordable housing across the county, addressing those needs in various communities, et cetera, and what's workable for those communities. And I am going to assume that you've gotten with the administration at this time here, or will be getting with the administration to give some suggestion for Beaufort to move forward. Whether it's 1, 2, 3 different approaches.
Sure.
And what is the best approach that we could use, and then the body here will decide on that. And I'm going to have to really depend on your expertise and others to kind of guide me
Sure.
in that direction. But affordable housing and workforce housing is something that's a top priority for this council and for me as well. So I don't have a question there, other than if the question is, are you working with the administration to give us some guidelines and approaches to moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a big part of why I'm here today. That's what the administration wanted. We're, candidly, very much, kind of in the infancy of this, but I think there's certainly a understanding of how important this issue is to council and a realization of how important the issue is to the community. And so I'm all in on that, Councilman Glover. So but part of what we're gonna need to I don't want to spend too much time and talk about how we do, for example, a referendum. If council says there's no desire on this council to have a referendum on issuance of debt. So we can present all that, but we want to make it tailored to things that, that seem like a good fit to this council. So we'll also be looking for that feedback. If you say, yeah, that's great that this worked someplace else, this isn't a good thing for us, but go down this other path, and then we'll dig deep there. But we can make it as broad as you want and bring back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and pick the 3 you like, as well. So we just,
Hey, Alex, I have a final
we're
question.
trying to force feed anything. I'm just trying to
Right.
explain what we've seen have worked, and then what works for the Beaufort community is what we want to help y'all do.
I think Councilman McKellen has one last
Yeah,
question. and-
one final question, Ms. Cook.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned water and sewer, and a lot of the places that we might need to build this type of affordable or workforce housing, there's no water and sewer. And you made a connection of how to perhaps provide the water and sewer in addition to engaging in building the workforce or remediating the workforce housing. Will you be able to tell us, you don't have to do it this minute,
Sure.
but as part of follow-up, can you be clear for us on the connection with regard to water and sewer development and workforce housing in the event there is no water and sewer where we want to build?
Absolutely. So I think I was talking specifically in that case about the TIF, because the TIF
Right.
is a requirement for public ownership, including, water and sewer would qualify for that, but it wouldn't be limited to that. So you could, but absolutely. I mean, often we see, what are the impediments to these properties being developed, right? So one is
Right.
like, where does this property exist that's where people need to or want to live, right? So but sometimes the issue is, this is all great, but there's no sewer on this property, right? So, so TIF would be one place we could talk about, Councilman, but, it could be broader. I mean, you can do general obligation bonds to extend water and sewer lines, but yes, sir, absolutely, because that is a critical component.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
When you described it as a buffet, it really is a buffet.
So you probably have a little indigestion here, but it's
We just need to decide how much we want to eat and what we.
That's right. And I think it's, this is huge, and y'all are ahead of a lot of areas in terms of the recognition that you're given it. And it's okay to start with, pick your favorite, right? Where do you want to start in the buffet? And it's not going to be the only thing you can do, but we don't have to do it all at once,
Been very good, very excellent. Another.
Yeah, if I might follow up on Councilman McEllen's question about the availability of water and sewer. In the event that water and sewer is prohibited, and that you'll find this mostly in the rural parts of the county, water and sewer is prohibited, so then the only source of water supply would be a private well. So this program would not be prohibited, or the construction of the home would not be prohibited because water and sewer is not applicable?
So you don't have to have the water and sewer. I mean, so if a private homeowner had a septic tank and his or her own well, I mean, you could still do these other things we've talked about. But I was talking about, the infrastructure itself for the water and sewer could be financed through some of the things we've talked about.
Just wanted to make sure.
But you could have, in a rural area, someone's on a septic tank, for example, doesn't mean these other things would go away.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I think our administrator is going to follow up with, is there one more thing to talk
Yes,
about?
yes, there is. First, thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming today. He did meet with us earlier, so we kind of have a lunch meeting to get some things figured out. 2 weeks ago, myself and staff met with Wendy Zara and Dick Stewart in the back of the room. We had a good conversation, as well as met with Community Works and had some really good discussions with all the parties. I also want to thank council and appreciate your patience as I learn about this very complex issue and different ways to solve it. And the example of using solutions as a buffet is exactly it. Tom Cavaney has done tons and tons of research, looked at what other nearby local municipalities has done, looked at what other folks throughout the state have done, searching for successful examples. And I really think it's going to be that buffet of successful examples that are going to push us forward. Our intent, or my intent, is to come to council asking for guidance during our strategic planning process. I'm certain that affordable housing is on, or workforce housing is at the top of our concerns as we develop our strategic plan and then begin our budgeting process for next year. So that'll be something that's really on the forefront and important for us to tackle. I know we have a few minutes before our 3 o'clock meeting starts, so I can talk briefly about some projects that we that we're working on now. I think Hank is prepared to discuss for just a few moments some actions that are going on right now. Yes, sir? Oh, he's good.
All right, I'll come up and get you. Hold on. Hold on. Backyard. Hold on.
Yeah, I share with you a parcel that would be
Yes, sir.
considered for something like this here. And I'm not, because, I don't own that, somebody else is on it, blah, blah, blah. I would love for you, and I don't think he would have a problem if you use that as an example of what could happen or what can happen, and with all these various options that's out there.
There's a beautiful model that fits with what you're talking about, and some other agencies have used this, where the county can purchase a piece of property and then partner with a developer to build or a workforce housing kind of properties.
what I'm just
Anything
using-
from small properties, from a
Sure.
few acres to many acres.
And all I'm saying is use that as a model, and
Yes, sir.
tear it
Hank's
up
going
and
to
do
talk
whatever
about
you
one
can
of
do with
those
it.
that we're working on
Thank you.
right now.
Stealing my thunder. Don't steal my thunder.
A little bit.
Yeah. I don't know how we can plug this in. Do you have a? All right. We just want to give a couple updates. And as they said today, and we spoke about kind of so many different options of how to do these things, what we focused on are some pretty clean and quick options that would involve the one that we didn't talk about, which is land contribution, or where the public entity buys or previously owns property. And what you can do here is contribute it, whether that's through a long-term land lease, or in some cases, there's even a transfer with covenants and restrictions. But that's how you can take off some of these expenses to make these properties and these projects more doable on a pro forma basis. And so the two that I've been focusing on, let's see if I can hit the arrows here. One is at Buckwalter. If you remember earlier this year, we authorized the administrator to put this property under contract, but we were informed immediately thereafter that there were no residential dwelling units on that property. So that was where the bulk of our work has gone. I met with the Affordable Housing Committee last Thursday at the town of Bluffton. They are now in favor of this project. We, in the process, have partnered with another public entity, which would be Beaufort Memorial Hospital, which we've shown many successful partnerships over the last couple of years, many years, but over the last couple of years especially, because they are in need of workforce housing, and they've even gotten into, as Ms. Zara mentioned, into the development side to start saying, if we want to move the needle, let's do it. So with the Buckwalter option, through our discussions of getting these residential dwelling units, the town and the mayor spoke back to me and to Russell about what if we could accomplish two things and actually get some more medical office offerings and still get the units of the affordable housing to make all these numbers make sense. And so what we proposed, without reading all this slide to you, because it talks about the steps of engaging an engineer, and I know you guys don't have too much time, but we are to that point where we have plans. They have a partner named Woda Cooper Company that is on the other deal for Okatee, that they would propose to put in this application by December 17 for the tax credit portion. And we requested 120 dwelling units on Thursday that will go to their council, I believe at their next meeting, and they have what's called a dwelling bank. They have a residential dwelling unit bank within the Buckwalter PUD. I've got a couple pictures of this property, if it will. As you can see, this is just just across the street from Buckwalter Place. It's 10.9 acres. It's in a great, as we talked about, sometimes there's no water and sewer, you're too far from services, or you're too far from a job. In this case, it's right across the street from services. It's right in the middle of where jobs are, and it's on a public transit route with Palmetto Breeze. The town, we've asked for them to contribute these units. These units are worth something, but they are very much behind this, that they would contribute these. We could then turn around potentially, I was going to wait and make a more formal presentation when Russell's here to make the request, but the request would be for the county to partner with them on the portion of the land that would be for affordable housing. Because a lot of times the medical office can stand on its own. This helps the overall delivery of medical services in the Bluffton area. It greatly helps the affordable housing situation because it'd be 120 units, which would be a mix between 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. It would be 100% affordable and a mix between 40, 60, and 80% of AMI. So they'd all be very, relatively, I could say, very affordable units because a lot of them are 100% or above in the new world. But this is just one, this is something that could happen quickly, but the ask in the end would be for the county to probably long-term lease. We'd have to figure out how the ownership structure works, but we win because there's medical office delivery, there is affordable housing right next to all these services. So if there's any questions on this one, you can do it now or ask me later. But this is very exciting and has come along. It seems like it takes forever, but then all of a sudden at the end, it starts building and clicking. The next one, a couple more slides, just it's complicated. Yes, sir?
How many houses did you?
These would be apartments and they'd be 120 units.
Okay.
And while moving forward with development, we will be environmental sensitive, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's right now going on currently. And there are a lot of moving parts going on. We engaged Ward Edwards engineers to do site planning. They've got a revisit of the wetlands delineation map currently going on. They've done.
Tool on those, is the, would it be for a period of time?
So that's why we would write into the terms of the transfer of property or contribution of property that would go farther out into the future. Because the old historic, as we know, you talked about the 25 or 30-year horizon, and all of us used to think that was a long time. And now we realize as they roll off that that's not a long time. So that we spoke about that with the town last week is to potentially double that. But if we control the land, we can even make it go farther out into the future. And the company that would own and operate the rental portion is the Woda Cooper Company. Their mission is affordable housing. A lot of companies do affordable housing while the tax credits help pay and then immediately flip to the other side. They would be willing to play with a longer time horizon, which is what we want to do.
Thank you.
And the yellow dotted line is interior roads?
Yeah, another ways to access from the inside of that property. This is the TCL properties. We initially bought this, you initially bought those properties right as I think I started working here right after. Then it was handed off to say, what can we do here? And we engaged the local architect. And it became kind of a convoluted process because we're not developers. That's why I like partnering with a developer, partnering with the hospital, partnering with somebody who has a vested interest and professionals on their side. And so because they have such a direct need, we've helped them with developing and training nurses. We've helped them with building capacity at the hospital for crisis stabilization, et cetera. The next thing is, where do these people live? So in this case, they're in the planning process. It's not as far along, even though we started talking about it first, where the hospital would make a proposal to redevelop those properties in a nice manner. I've seen the preliminaries, it's good. They will come back to say, this would be dedicated towards medical employees. The other one would be open to the public, even though it would be adjacent to the actual medical office. In order to be in that world with Woda Cooper, it is open to everyone. So we'll be bringing you a proposal for this. I don't know the exact units, but it would be a mix between some attached and some detached to better fit with the neighborhood, because there has been a good bit of feedback and information with the neighborhood, and we want to make sure that we do something that's in harmony with, but there has to be enough units in order for it to be a true workforce or attainable situation. So we're working on that blend of how it best meshes with the neighborhood. So those two properties are the ones that I've been working the most on. And in order, like I said, to kind of short circuit, the public partnership with the hospital really makes sense to help jumpstart these first couple to get them going. And then long term, we can talk about property acquisition and private partnership.
And they can walk to work.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it's a great location.
So Hank just discussed two projects that are in the workings. The next one is Justice Square. This property was approved by council for the sale of it in October of last year. Since then, I've been working with the developer, Wheeler, and they have gone through the process. As of last week, they got their final approvals from the city of Beaufort's HRB. This property is at Wilmington and King Streets, the current location of the old jail, as well as the two DHEC buildings. You'll see here the proposed plan. This is a conceptual plan on the bottom here. Justice Place is going to be what is the current old jail. He is renovating it. That will be, I believe, approximately 7 to 10 units in there. The cottages of Justice Square are going to be on that same block to the north. That'll be 12 to 14 single-family homes. He has promised that those will remain in the $300,000 price range. The remaining of the block is going to be 39 plus units of affordable housing. And what I will show you here is what the street is going to look like at the end. I have, our final meeting is on Friday to put this under contract so that Mr. Wheeler can start this project. On the left, you'll see the jail. These units here are all going to be the $300,000 properties, and the remaining portion is all going to be the affordable housing units.
Do you know the term, well, if you can tell us yet, length of time for?
It is, due to the state and federal funding, it will probably be a year. Construction will start then. He is doing it in phases, and based on the agreements and the ordinance that was put in place by you, the single-family homes, he's planning on only building 6 of those. You approved 7 to be built prior to any of the affordable housing, but it is, again, the construction on the remaining single-family is contingent on all of the affordable housing being completed. So,
And what's the terms of how long it has to remain affordable housing?
you approved for, I believe it was 25 years. SRDP, I believe, is at 30, but I would refer probably to our bond counsel to know whether or not that's the standard. It may be 35.
Okay, just,
So these will be rental units.
Yes, the one block of King Street will be rental units here. These will all be privately owned, though. The ones over on
Right,
this
I got
block.
you.
This block will all be privately owned.
And the renovation of the jail is going to be apartments?
Yes, and they're condo units. It is a pretty impressive renovation. I'm not sure when those will be completed, but I know he is in the process right now.
Okay.
The only comment I will make, Madam Chairman, is that, 30 years would be really the minimum I would want to support. And in that, I was just, when I first came on council, there were some units after 20 years, and people would kind of misplace, displace, et cetera. So it just give them a longer period of time if that could happen. So, just
Like
my
I said, our
comments.
final meeting's on Friday. I will ask for that. I know that Hank and his projects, as you said, we're also exploring options with EMH and other entities for land leases and other land restrictions placed on properties that would be
Yes.
longer than the 30.
Yes.
For downtown Beaufort, though, I think this is a pretty great project in its
Yes.
location.
yeah. Okay, thank you very much. The next,
If
is,
you don't mind, I just
Sure.
have a few words to sum up our workshop.
that was great. 3 projects.
Well, thanks so much. You can tell that staff has been working on all these projects for a long time. Some of them are Justice Center over a year. Some of the projects with Beaufort Memorial, many, many months. Staff is dedicated to making this better. Like I said, we'll be coming to council with a lot of different options, seeking your guidance during our strategic planning process. In the interim, you saw Hank come up here and speak for quite a while. Hank is, many of staff member are doing double duty at the same time. So while Hank is officially the administrator's assistant, he works on our economic development and is taking on affordable housing as an additional task. Coming up in the future, it may be beneficial for the county to find a full-time employee to
Absolutely.
work in this
This is
program.
editorial, but absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, it's very, very complex
Yeah.
and so many moving parts. It'll be very important for us to use all of our resources, continue working with the Housing Trust, and do some of our own internal work along with our attorneys and staff. So that we might see some more work in this direction in the future. So thanks so much.
In our strategic planning. we need to talk
Absolutely.
about
I've been
that.
working
Thank you.
hard on that. It's a lot of work. Just to plan for a strategic plan is a lot of work. So
Yes.
hopefully that will be coming to you very soon as well.
Okay. Any
Thanks
other
so much.
comments, questions?
I would
Yes,
just say to John's point of bringing on somebody who would actually be the director over this program. We, the county, we had an affordable housing director in the past, and for us to go back to that, I think is beneficial for
Good,
not
thank
only
you.
your staff, but for the county as a whole.
Yes, sir.
I think Gerald remembers a very successful one many years ago, and then we had another attempt at it that was not successful about 20, maybe Wendy remembers.
Well, I'm speaking of the initial.
The initial one was very successful, but I think we need a third try would be great.
Right.
Yeah,
Even a failed attempt is a good try.
yes.
So we'll learn something from that too.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Okay, yes.
I'm just gonna follow up on Gerald's comment. John, Mr. Robinson, when we talk about affordable housing, we actually, for the county, there are a lot of municipalities and other government entities. Is there a working relationship there where the counties maybe the lead dog?
Yes, sir.
Excuse my expression on that.
Yes, sir.
And then the other entities are basically supporting that effort, or?
We've been working with the municipality, with the city of Beaufort, pretty closely to work on a few projects. Maybe it's a future project, but there's more to be done. And I would not call us the big dog in the room. It's important, perhaps, maybe lead, but it's very important to reach out to our partners and bring as many folks in who are all pulling in the same direction to solve this problem. And we're working on that every day.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Since it's a workshop and Wendy raised her hand,
Oh,
if you don't mind,
sure.
we'll let her, because she
The
remembers
Housing
history
Trust
too.
is such an organization, the Housing Trust. We are 8 jurisdictions. I would call the county the lead, wouldn't you, Alice?
Yes.
For the Housing Trust. And they're certainly the biggest, you're certainly the biggest contributor financially. And we are, all the jurisdictions in Beaufort and Jasper County, except for Ridgeland, who didn't want to join. That does not mean we would not build housing in Ridgeland if we had an opportunity. But so I would call this exactly what you were just asking, Mr. Glover.
Sure. Thank you, Wendy.
Okay, any other questions from county council? We have a few minute break before we
Yeah.
start at 3 o'clock. Start on time. Okay,
7 minutes.
7 minutes. Thank you.